Okay, so good morning and good to see you. And I'm glad that we are learning again. The Maamer that we've been doing, Micho, so with the English translation, the set that you can get from Kehot, we're doing the section which is starts on my edition at least. It starts on page 32. And it's with and it's in the paragraph which started with the area called the hidden roots. Now, what we've said till now is, and we've given an explanation of the idea of the flow of Seder Ishtalshalis. We've explained and discussed how everything that exists in this physical world has a source and receives sustenance, spiritual sustenance from the higher worlds. And in that sense, from the higher worlds, it takes energy and it gets creative and it gets created from that specific higher levels. So we continue the idea and say that everything, as we said, that is created from this spiritual source, but in a way of yesh ma'ayin. And we've been discussing that term yesh ma'ayin, what it can mean. The idea specifically really is that a person, a creation, something which is in this physical world, and certainly the human, the thinking man, knows that he has some sort of spiritual existence. He takes some spiritual energies from somewhere, but doesn't understand and doesn't know what it is. Therefore, he calls himself a entity. Hebrew word for that is yesh. He understands that he comes from somewhere. He gets his energies from somewhere, and since he doesn't know what that is, he calls that the ayin, a state of nothingness, a state of unresolved ununderstanding. It's a state of ayin, nothing. And this idea that we are a creation, yesh ma'ayin, that we feel that we are created, yesh ma'ayin, it means that this ayin, this level of creation capability, the level which we call the ayin, although it exists in everything, otherwise it wouldn't be here if it wasn't there. It's not felt in an existing sense because it's not felt in that I don't know that it's positivity, but on the other hand, I understand that it's there because I understand that things can't come from itself. There has to be a first cause. This level of ayin, undescribed as we are, is what energizes, gives energies and chayas to any particular creation. And what we have discussed is that Kabbalah teaches us that the original beginnings of that ayin is a very high spiritual state, a very intense spiritual state, that power of creation is something which de-evolves, which gets deconcentrated as it goes through the spiritual entities, and that this energy is concealed, and although there, it is concealed to such an extent that I get no understanding about it. The created entity doesn't understand about it. However, in the spiritual realms, this created energy, because it's in the spiritual realms, it understands its predecessor. Each level of energy understands and has a comprehension, at least some sort of comprehension, to the pre-existing state that it evolved from. So in the spiritual realm, although there is a decreasing of energies, that deconcentration is understood in a cause and effect manner, as discussed in our previous classes, and that because there's a decreasing in spiritual energy in a cause and effect manner, the effect understands somewhat its cause. But when we come to this physical realm, when we come to our existence, that level of understanding doesn't exist anymore, to the extent that all we can recognize about it is call it an ayin, because from the perspective of the created entity, its source is a state of nothing. It's aware of its source in some sort of way, knowing that it has to be there. If it would have a connective, a full connective understanding, like in the spiritual level, then it wouldn't constitute a physical existence, because by definition, a physical existence can't understand and can't connect and can't grasp, it can't be with its spiritual existence. So that's where with that understanding of the Yesh Me'ayin is where we got up to. So we're starting in the Hebrew in the section where it says about the idea of Bria Yesh Me'ayin. V'hinei Bria Yesh Me'ayin, this whole concept of the creation from nothing, hu shehadova mahaver mistata b'bechinas dova hamishaver. The created entity is hidden in the object which it has created, and it's hidden to the extent that, as we discussed, it only can grasp it by calling it something of an ayin. Because this is the essential difference of the chain of spiritual evolvement that we've discussed, that in the chain of spiritual involvement, as we discussed, from one spiritual entity to another spiritual entity, one understands the other. But when it comes to the actual creation in a physical sense, then the creative force is a Bria Yesh Me'ayin. And in that case, there is no understanding, as we've said. Continuing the Hebrew, because the idea of the chain of evolvement, because within that chain, what we call the effect or the outcome understands and has some sort of comprehension or a grasp within what causes him, what causes it. That is to say, continuing the Hebrew, because the lower level understands and has a grasp to the what created it, or what was its predecessor. And the traditional example is like in understanding or emotions. We understand one stage of comprehension from another stage of comprehension, a deeper level of comprehension. So therefore, we can build up a chain of understanding or emotion, or similarly in emotions. I can build up a chain of I can build up a chain of emotional consequences. And therefore, something typical like that can be called a chained event, a Seder of Ishtalshalos. And that's like a chain made up of metal rings. Shetabas achas debuka ba'achavata, that one part of the chain, one part of the ring of chains is locked into the other, into and attached into each other. However, creation per se, but the creation, something from nothing, that level of ayin, that creative force, is not understood or is not grasped at all by the created entity. And if it would grasp it, that is in a way of understanding and a consequential, it wouldn't be created as a physical entity. But Nimtza, therefore, we come out, we conclude, so every physical thing, that and has a source in the spiritual way, it must have had a stage of involvement from many different levels, like in a perception that's similar to the cause and effect process called il. And afterwards, continues mis'alem min hadova hamahava. It becomes hidden from its creator till a physical entity is created, and it's not understood, and it's not grasped from what was its creator, because it's hidden from it. So we've discussed this idea of the Seder Shtalshlis, the creation of Yesh Ma'ayin, and that's a total new entity, that there is a total new existence, a physical existence. So the author continues these thoughts, and he says, human, therefore we understand, Shagam im nemma matzias ha'elam, b'chol ma shenibra hu matzias. So even though we can say that created entities are an existence, there is the existence of a physical entity, but it's a consequence of a long period, a long creative process of spiritual pre-creation, spiritual involvement from one level to the other, till the idea of physical creation. However, the Rebbe Marash wants to emphasize over here, this existence of this existence that we enjoy, this idea of physical existence, even though we're not aware and we don't comprehend the spiritual cause and effect that's brought us here, and you might say that that's not an existence, you still must call our physical existence an existence, because from the truth of the Torah, continues his text, because what is it that the Torah says? That we were all created in the 6 days of creation, that everything in the physical realm was created in the 6 days of creation. Because if you will say that it just appears like some creation, but it's not, in that case, what is the Torah saying? That in the beginning Hashem created, if nothing was created, and everything's just an illusion. You must say that this physical existence of ours is a physical existence. It is an existence, and we do exist, and the world exists. However, we'll come to our conclusion soon, as the text continues. But to emphasize that we are not, that Chassidus and Judaism is not teaching that our existence isn't an existence, as some philosophies want to say. We are in existence, and because the Torah speaks about the creation, that in itself is the proof that we need that the physical realm exists. And we'll give another example from the Torah, but from a Mishnah or from our halachic text. Kedugmas Raya Lazer, and some sort of a proof from our text, from Maamer, Rabbi, from our sages. In particular, the Mishnah Seg Perik Zayin to Sanhedrin, in a Mishnah at the end of chapter 7 in the Masechta Sanhedrin, and we think about, and it speaks about an example of something that is an act of trickery that you might, and where there is an example of someone trying to trick or give an illusion about something, and we talk about what is reality and what isn't reality. So quoting, he says, right, Shnayim lektin kishuyim, two people are collecting cucumbers in a magical way. Echad leket, the one who collects, leket chayiv, he is guilty. And ve'echad leket, and another one who collects, potter, he can be not guilty. Now, why would we make a differentiation between? Because Asa Maisa, the one who does a physical act, chayav, even though he's committed the act via some sort of magic incantation or whatever it might be, because there's been a physical act involved, chayav, he is obligated and he is guilty. But the one who says nayim, and one who does some sort of trick in some sort of way as an illusion, he's manipulating your eyes, potter, he is not guilty. Now that's the quote out of the Mishnah. The idea being that a physical act rather than an illusion is a reality. So let's see how he expresses it, the author expresses it. If you would say that the physical realm is of not existence at all, so if you will say that there doesn't exist a physical world, then why is the one who does a physical act the one who's guilty? Because you can imagine that there might be that the cucumbers are just an illusion from the beginning. If the world doesn't exist, then the cucumbers don't exist. And if you're saying that it's only if you're saying that those cucumbers which he collected is only an illusion, right, then why should he be guilty? In a similar sense, and if you're going to say that the person who did it as an illusion, are you going to say that the reason why it's not chayav is the one who did it via an illusion, a magical ways and that was just a trickery of the hands, right? You're saying the reason why he's potter, then you can say that his punishment that he might forget it doesn't exist at all. And you're also implying that there isn't any idea that there's no true reward and punishment. And that would also imply below yesh Torah, and that the Torah is not true in its physical sense. And the mitzvahs are not true. Shazay yif sheklal, and that's impossible. But the Rebbe Marash says, Elo, inyan hu, de be'emes metzias, elam hu metzias. But the reality is that the physicality and the creation of the world do exist. But every physical object of all the aspects of in the world and all the realms of the Bria Yetzir Asiyah, of the spiritual worlds called Bria Yetzir Asiyah, the three spiritual worlds of which are in the of the four worlds of the four spiritual worlds. Each one of them has a source in above, and and they evolved from a state, and they evolved in different levels, one spiritual level giving way to another spiritual level. And then at the time when it was time to create, they were creating yesh ma'ayin, hainu b'china samahava, mistata min hadova misava, and the level and the capability, the process of creation is hidden from what came into existence. But if the object which creates became revealed to the one that creates became revealed to the object that it created, then the object which would be created would become and dissolve into nothingness. If it would be revealed to it, then it would be of the same level, and then it would be grabbed by it. It would be consumed by it, and then it would be totally come to a state of non-existence. And further, thinking along this line, so we go to the next section of the text, and the Rebbe Marash is continuing his thesis, and he's saying that the proof of the idea that in the spiritual realm everything is a ilul bi'olul process, a cause and effect process from a higher level of intensity to a lower level of intensity, from a higher level of absorption of spirituality to a lower level of revelation of spirituality. He gives another example from the Torah. Hamefes lezer, the sign for this, shari gam, or a teaching about this, or a proof, you can say. Hamefes lezer shari gam hamalachim. So even in the angel kingdom, and the angels are Gam hamalachim heim sichlim nobdolim. They are what we call abstract intelligence, abstract intelligences that exist. That the term, and this is a term that we use, the term that the Rambam uses, a term that we use in Jewish words, that they are purely a spiritual existence, but they differ from themselves by the level of their understandings and awareness of spirituality, as explained by the Rambam in his Guide to the Perplexed. And continuing the text, right? So these, the Malachim, are Sichnolim Nibdolim v'Nibraim Gedolim. They are great creations. And the idea that they are great is that they're spiritually great, and the expression of the Torah which relates to them is Ma God L'Masecho, how great is your works of Hashem. Our sages say about that. Nevertheless, even though they are so great, continuing, Hine Omer Rabbeinu Zechreinu Lebracha, our sages say about it. Our sages say about a medrash involving the Malachim that Hekshit HaKadosh Baruch Hu Etzvo Katano B'neihem, Hashem extended his finger amongst them, from, and they became burned. That is to say that Hashem, by revealing himself a little bit more, consumed them. This teaches us that the Malachim, even though they are so great and considered separate intelligences, and we praise them by the Torah calling Ma Rabba Masecho, how great is your works, when they were revealed a little bit more than their capabilities could absorb, they became consumed. If we look into the note 115 in the translated text, we can get a little bit more background on it. So number 115, when God sought to create man, he created a group of ministering angels and asked them, "Is it your will that we create man in our image?" And they replied, "Master of the universe, what are his deeds?" God said, "Such and such will be his deeds, and they will and both good and evil." They said to Hashem, Master of the universe, and quoting a verse, "What is man that you should remember him, the Son of Man that you should be mindful of him?" God then extended his little finger amongst them and consumed them. Gemara says, Sanhedrin 8:38b. This idea, now explaining what that means, the extending of God's little finger refers to a revelation of the 10th and lowest of the 10 spheres, Malchus, the source for creation. And when this source is revealed to the created entity, the entity loses its being. By consuming the angels through revelation, God answered their questioning regarding the value of the creation of man. Man, through the fulfillment of God's will on the physical plane, would transcend the limitations inherent to creation and would be able to receive revelation without losing his existence. Teaching us, so the point that we were teaching us that man is different, but the angels, because a man is different because he's got a neshama, and his neshama comes from the highest roots and therefore is capable of receiving higher states of revelation and expanding. He's a mahalach. But in this context, we're referring to the angels. The angels themselves, if they receive something beyond a revelation beyond their existence, they get totally consumed. The point that we're bringing out over here is the idea that in the spiritual state, even though there are many different revelations, a higher revelation that goes beyond its specific stature, the stature of the Malachim at any point in time, consumes the Malachim. So, going back to the main text, and he says that if what we just said, or we'll say the Hebrew one, that Pirish, the explanation is Shekash and Izgala Alehem, when Hashem revealed Yosem Ma'achei Kakotzav Lahem, more than their expected and capable level of revelation, is Bachla Lagamri, they became totally nullified. Because Keshahoyim Izgala Al Sharin Abraham, so how much more so that any other creations, if they were given some sort of revelations beyond what they can, they would certainly become totally non-existence. What's the outcome of this thought process? Im kain, therefore, gamba esa she'ena misgala haleihem. And it follows that even when they are not confronted with such revelation, sharehem nimtsoyim liyesh b'dova makol mokom ena matziyosa amiti. That even when they're not confronted with such revelations, that they have to be considered, even though they are great works themselves, but when they get some sort of level of revelation which is beyond their capability, their own metzias, their own existence becomes nullified and they get totally consumed. They don't exist as independent beings. And therefore that shows that they're not truly in existence. They're not a true Eina Metzias Amiti. They're not a true existence. Further, we have another concept in halacha, which we want to talk about, which we want to bring, which we want to bring to the discussion, which is the idea of permanence or non-permanence. We have a halacha which relates to waters and rivers, and we have an expression about it. So that's our next area that we're going to discuss. And further idea in relationship to the idea of an existence. Harayel is there, min amachazvim. A further proof can be brought from the idea, from the concept in halacha, which refers to the rivers which dry up. Machazvim achas b'shvua, that they dry up they can dry up within a period of 7 years. Haino achas l'sheva shonim, that if they dry up once within a 7-year period, harem psulim, the kiddush meichatos, they can't be used in the process of the making the meichatos, the waters of the red heifer, which are sprinkled on a toma person. Hagam sheke'ez heim helchim b'teiv, even though the rivers were strong and flowed rak ma'achas she'achas l'sheva shonim, but once it doesn't flow within a 7-year period, once, as the line goes, rak ma'achas she'achas l'sheva shonim nifsek ahilchon, once its flow dries up after 7 years, heim pasolim gam ba'ez helchim, so they are considered postal as the idea of ma'im chaim, of living waters, for the usages for the meichatas, for the word of the meichatas. That is to say that we can't consider it within the stage that the waters from this river should be considered waters which are usable for the meichatas, called living waters, ma'im chaim, and because they don't extend beyond the 7-year cycle, we are looking for the idea of what it means, the living waters. We're trying to understand the idea of living, true life, true existence. So we now see that in halacha, if water doesn't exist, if the river doesn't flow continuously for longer than a period of 7 years, that's not called the idea of living. Its existence is suspect. Its existence is not called a conceptual permanency. That is to say that within this physical realm, a period of 7 years, a cycle, a sabbatical year, a shemitah is considered living, is considered one full cycle, a shemitah period. So if the rivers go for longer than continue to flow for longer than the 7 years, that's considered a good cycle. That's considered a living cycle. So within the realm of spiritualism, something which goes beyond the 7 is something which is a true type of existence. Continuing this idea, and our sages have said that shis alpei shona haba alma, that the world will exist for a period of 6 millennia, and one millennium will be destroyed. Shanimsa achas b'shavua pen kosmim. So that will be that 1 in the 7 year, 1 in the 7 cycle will be not existing. It won't exist. It won't have a true existence. Lochen gamba esasha elam nimsa. So even though the physical world will exist, that shows in a similar spiritual sense that this life, the physical life that we lead and live and exist in, is not a true existence. And it's only that, and it is that the only being that the Hashem wills it, that the creative force of the world can be revealed to some created being, and it will be all become non-existent. What does that mean? What does that line mean? What does the Rebbe want to tell us? That Hashem can reveal himself and reveal the creative force in the world, and the world itself, as opposed to the neshama, but the world itself, if Hashem reveals himself as the created world and doesn't change things, then, and it's not the period of Mashiach, right? Then the world will come into a state of ein be'efes mahakol. It can come total non-existence. Further stressing, so this line further stressing the idea that our existence, this physical world's existence, even though it has a sense, it does exist, but it doesn't have a permanent existence, because it'll be destroyed once. It won't live beyond. It won't exist beyond that 7 millennium period, that 7 cycle. V'zeh shekosav HaRambam, and this coincides with what the Rambam writes, ala posik, on the verse, Hashem Elokim emes, that Hashem alone is true. Hu levadei emes, only He is true. V'ein la'acha emes, and there's no other truth ka'amitosei, like He's true. V'zeh ein od milvadei, and this is the idea that there's nothing else beside Him. She'ein sham emes motzui milvad kamesa. There is no other true existence besides His existence. As the Rambam wrote, and as we quoted really in the beginning of the series where we learned this. And further, Al Pizeh Yuvan Masha Targum Yedison, and this is how the Targum Yedison translates the idea. He translates, who is like you amongst the supernal beings, that the less kavosayich ba'ele meremo. There is nothing like you among the supernal beings. Eila Marimim, and when with the reference to those which are in the supernal, Haim Nibrahim, they are the creations which are created, but they are created Yeshma'ayin, something they are created Yeshma'ayin, but it says Saberim with the will of Hashem. Yochali Galas Aleihim, he's capable of revealing to them Shorsham and Makirim, their source. But then Bizbatlu, they become total nullified, like Ami. As in the similar idea, Ki'inya, like we said, Hishit, when Hashem extended his finger, Lochen Gam Aksho. Therefore, our conclusion is, and this is one of the points that the Maamer wants to emphasize, that therefore, its existence, because its existence will become nullified, Lochen Gam Aksho. Therefore, even now, while it's in existence, Eina Kiyam Amiti, its existence is not a true existence. But Lochen, therefore, we can use the expression less kavasayich. There's nothing like you. Ki hu lavadei emes, because only Hashem is true. V'ein la'ach emes, and nothing else is true. Ba'amitosei, in its level of truth. So what is the summary of our learnings for today? The idea is that where we started from in this Maamer was to explain the idea of Mi Chamocha, to understand who is like you, Hashem, and the idea of existence. We argued in today's session that the physical world does exist. There is an existence in this physical world, but it's a limited existence. And even in the spiritual worlds, there is limited existence, because if Hashem would extend and increase his presence, his level of intensity, and show his level of existence, then all the spiritual realms would cease to exist, because they wouldn't be able to exist in that realm. And we gave examples in halacha. We gave examples in the realm of halacha that there is something in halacha considered like a natural stage, whether it be the idea of a river that existence and its existence within 7 years, or with the idea of the malachim or the angels, how great they are. If there's something which goes beyond that, that's called living, but something which is in its constrained mechanism is not called real existence. So this is the idea that we explained before, that who Hashem, who is like you, Hashem, that there is no other existence. True existence doesn't exist except for God's existence in its true and fullest sense, and that's a true existence with a capital T, with the idea of that even in the supernal beings, even the spiritual realms, there's no existence. There's no existence which is like Hashem. And all our existences that we have, even though they are true existences, are not comparable to the idea of God's existence. And if they would be, and if godliness would be revealed in its fullest sense, then they would have no existence. They would be, or any existence that we've known would be totally nullified. We'll continue on in our next session and coming to the closing of the Maamer soon. So I'll wish you a good day, and we'll meet again in our next opportunity.